Whenever I look back through my life, I ask myself, where did I meet God the most? Where did I encounter God the most? And it's always in the times where
Mm,
in the moment, I was like, why is this happening to me? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this happening to me? Right. And just like, oh, God. And then looking back at it, I'm like, oh, those were my encounters with God, right? Those were like the moments where I started like growing the
mm.
most.
Hello, friend. Welcome back to the Awakened Entrepreneur Show. This is Juan Galán, your host, and I am back with another guest. His name is Jakob. He is a purpose mentor, speaker, a plant medicine guide, and a soul aligned entrepreneur. And the story of how we met is pretty cool. Actually, he was a guest in another podcast where I was a guest as well. And then I saw his podcast interview. I followed him, he followed me back, and we connected. And then we have a lot of things in common, especially our passion for spirituality and entrepreneurship. So we hopped on a call just to get to know each other. And I told him, like, listen, I want all of this in a podcast episode. So here we are today. So without further ado, welcome Jakob to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation.
This is going to be a very powerful one. I've heard a lot of other podcast shows and episodes where you've been, and I just love your whole story. It's super empowering. When we talked a couple of weeks ago, I remember telling you, like, man, like, it seems you've lived so many lives in just one life. So we're going to be covering all of this. We're going to be talking about healing illnesses through spirituality, ayahuasca, purpose, and divine guidance in business. So before getting started, Jakob, why don't you tell people that don't know you yet who you are and what you do?
So, my name is Jakob. I come from Slovenia, which is a very small country in Central Europe. And I grew up in a family that didn't really have much. And always had this dream for more, always had this desire for more. And when I was about 12 years old, actually, maybe when I was about 8 years old, I developed a case of eczema, of a skin condition. And when I was about 12, it started getting really, really intense. And it got so intense to the point that I couldn't sleep because when I would sleep, I would scratch myself and I would bleed. My mom made me cotton gloves to be able to fall asleep. And at some point, um, actually started affecting also how I was relating to people. I was isolating. I was always being alone. I was just reading books and escaping into the fantasy lands as much as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I was about 13, 14 years old, I found a book on my grandma's shelf when it was talking about hypnosis and self-healing, got into meditation, started going on that path really deep when
Wow.
I'm sure we're going to go a little bit into that as well. But
Yep.
basically that all led me to just listening to personal development, learning about myself, about psychology, about life, read spiritual
Mm.
books up until I was 18. And when I was 18 years old, I decided to leave Slovenia and started traveling the world. And first few years led me through a lot of homelessness and struggle and really a lot of hardship. Ended up working in a lot of hospitality jobs, warehouses, manual work. And then over time started getting into different spaces such as living with the yogis in India, living in the Amazon with indigenous people, getting into plant medicine spaces, building retreat centers, and then eventually starting to work with some world-renowned coaches and leading retreats, facilitating really high-impact entrepreneurs. And that's where we're at right now. Very short
Um,
version of a story, but it opens up the whole topic.
we're gonna go deep into all of the things you mentioned, but I'm just so impressed at all the things you've done. How old are you again?
29.
You're 29, and as like you've lived so many different lives and like identity shifts throughout your whole life. So I want to go back to your teenage days. It must have been really hard to, when, especially, I mean, being a teenage is already hard, but suffering a severe eczema and having to hide yourself because you didn't feel confident, and which at the same time, like it happened for you, and you said you started learning about personal development and spirituality, and like most people, most that get into this space don't start getting into this until later in their lives, like maybe young adulthood or even later in adulthood. But for you, it started really, really early. What do you think this season taught you about yourself?
It's interesting because something in what I heard you say is it happened for you. And whenever I look back through my life, I ask myself, where did I meet God the most? Where did I encounter God the most? And it's always in the times where
Mm,
in the moment I was like, why is this happening to me? Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this happening to me? Right. And just like, oh God. And then looking back at it, I'm like, oh, those were my encounters with God, right? Those were like the moments where I started like growing the
mm,
most. And yeah, as you said that it was really challenging to be just, and I know a lot of teenagers go through that in their own way, right? Just
mm.
insecurity and like all of that stuff is totally normal. And in the phase where all my friends were getting girlfriends and going out and having connections and boyfriends and friends and all of that, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm alone, right? And every time I looked at myself in the mirror, it was like, oh, I don't like what I'm seeing. And that
Mm.
was something that propelled me so deep in personal development that now that I look back at it, I would not trade that for anything. Actually, I find that to be literally one of the biggest blessings in my entire life.
It's amazing. And what do you think was the thing that drove you to dive into personal development and spirituality? Because as you said, like a lot of teenagers struggle with their own things, but they just become rebellious. They just, maybe get into really negative habits. But for you, you were somehow drawn to reading personal development books and learning about spirituality. Was there like a specific pool that you felt like, what was the thing that like, yeah, led you there instead of what the common things that teenagers, like rebellious teenagers, do?
Well, I tried rebelling as well. It just hasn't really worked for me. I just rebelled in my own way because I realized that the things that everyone else was doing weren't really working for me. At the
Mm,
time also, like I drank a lot with all the other kids when I was about 15, and I realized it just doesn't work for my body. It just made me feel sick. It made me feel bad. I tried smoking weed. It made me feel paranoid. I wanna
mm,
like that, right? I wanna like
yeah.
that because I wanna connect and I wanna belong. But something was just like, oh, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't like it's not good in my body. And the fact that I healed my skin condition with meditation, I became so attuned to what my body was wanting and what my body was asking for that I couldn't keep dishonoring my body in that way. My way of rebelling actually was personal development. And I ended up skipping school to study psychology. I ended up skipping school and like going into the library, and skipping school and just like downloading things from the internet, like seminars from like Tony Robbins and Joe Dispenza, and listening to as much of that as I possibly could. So again, it was a similar pull to just like rebel from the world. And I believe that that was also the reason why I left Slovenia and started traveling, because I didn't want to be here. It was another form of rebellion as well.
Yeah. And you also rebelled against the doctors, right? Who said that you couldn't heal. And you like decided, nope, that's not true. And you ended up healing yourself, like lost it. Yeah. What was the moment that you decided that you were going to let doctors or circumstances define your healing?
I don't remember if there was a specific moment, but what happened was I found a book on my grandma's shelf. And again, I was just wanting to find ways to escape and to run
Or the
away.
book found you,
Or the
right?
book found me. Yeah, exactly. And I read through it. It was a very boring book on like medicinal plants. And at the end of the book, there was a chapter that was talking about self-healing and hypnosis. And I read that chapter and I thought, up until that point, I was like, I thought hypnosis was just something I saw in the movies where, the evil guy is like hypnotizing all of the good guys. And,
Mm,
and then I was like, oh,
yeah.
that's actually like a healing modality. And I got so curious, and I had this old MP3 that I got, and I started like recording my own voice inside of it and putting myself to sleep through hypnosis.
Wow.
And then suddenly I was able to fall asleep, right? Having developed really intense insomnia. And then the next thing I did was found myself in the self-help section of the library and basically just moved there for hours and hours every day. I was just browsing through different books. And something that I've learned is that if you're interested in a book, likely on the side of that book, you're going to find some interesting new things that you've never heard of that are going to open up your world to new possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I want to ask you about your grandmother because you said you found this book in your grandmother's shelf. Was she some sort of like, yeah, was she a spiritual person or some sort of mystic? Or like, who was her and what was your relationship with her? Because I think that's a very important and pivotal part of your journey, right?
Yeah, she was definitely not spiritual and definitely not mystic. She has not
Okay.
allowed a cross in his house. She grew up in a very socialist environment. So
Okay.
back in the Yugoslavia times, where all the countries were combined in a socialist system. And something that they learned from that point, and her generation knew very well, was the president or dictator of that specific constellation used to put Muslims and Jews and Christians all together, and they would all be in the same space, and they would all eat together, and they would all connect with each other. And he made people believe that religion doesn't matter, that spirituality doesn't matter, that the humanity is what really matters. So she grew
Which
up
is
in
kind of
that
true.
space. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we need more of that now. But yeah, basically, like that generation grew up on the idea that they actually didn't allow any religious artifacts in their houses. So there was no crosses that were allowed at her house. There was no spirituality there. It was just books on history, books on plants, books on, like very scientific books that were there.
So
And
what
this
was
was
that
one of
book
those.
doing there?
No, the book was actually about medicinal plants. So there was nothing unscientific about it. It's just
Okay.
something that the Western doctors don't like to look at. But she grew up in a countryside, so a lot of her books were like, how do you use things from the garden? How do you use this? How do you use that? Right? It was
Gotcha.
just that last little chapter was talking about something that was a little bit alternative.
Yeah. So you mentioned meditation, hypnosis were like the two biggest practices that help you during your healing. What else? Like what did a typical day of self-development look like for teenage Jacob?
I threw myself in there. I consumed it. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep, literally, I would be listening to Tony Robbins in the background while I was reading other books. I would hypnotize myself a few times a day through the recordings that I recorded for myself.
It's
I
amazing.
meditated for an hour, 2 hours, sometimes every single day. Whenever I did go to school, which I skipped a lot of at that time, if I did go to school, I would sit in the back with my eyes closed and meditate half of the time. All the other kids would make fun of me for that as well. And I was actually a pretty good student. And I realized that because I didn't want to study further, I didn't want to go to university, I decided I'm going to travel the world and do things my own way. And so I didn't really care about the grades that I was having either. So when everybody else was struggling about getting good grades, I was just actually having fun, and I would go to school just to connect with other kids. And whenever there was like deep study, I would just sit in the back and meditate.
Like most teenagers are just nowadays are like drinking and smoking, and there you were, changing your entire life and creating your future. That's amazing. I want to talk a little bit more about your travel stories, because you've traveled around the world and you have some epic stories. Like you mentioned, you nearly got killed in a robbery. You've been in Vietnam, Malaysia, Argentina, hitchhiking, motorcycle accidents, soul awakening. So tell us a little bit about the Jacob in those travels, like who were you back then, and like what lessons did you learn during your travels?
Yeah. I love the question in this, which is who I was as opposed to what I was doing. I think the biggest driver for me was I just wanted to move, and I knew that something bigger was there. So it was almost like every little bit of the road allowed me to shed a part of my identity. And there was so much curiosity of who I am behind all of the identities that I put on myself. So I actually
Love that.
let life rip me apart and rip me open and rip my heart open as much as was humanly possible, as much as I could allow myself to do that. So yeah, I was very driven, and I was moving around constantly. So as soon as I got to one place, I felt like I got as much out of it as I possibly could, and then I would move on to the next one. And I would sometimes move from place to place every few days, sometimes every few weeks. And most of the time I had nothing. Most of the time I was either sleeping on people's couches or in very cheap hostels, or sometimes outside. I had a period when I was homeless in southern France where I literally slept in the streets.
Wow.
And it was this drive to I just want to see what else life is and what is possible in this
Yeah.
space that just kept me going.
That's insane. Like you've literally lived so many different lives and identities. And I guess travel played a huge role in those different identities, right? Like, sleeping on the streets in the south of France, then to like living with indigenous tribes in the Amazon. Like normally a person would just do one of those things in their entire life. So I do want to talk about your experience in the Amazon. You lived with an indigenous tribe for how long?
Well, I lived in the Amazon, so kind of like as a region on and off
Okay.
different tribes and in different centers and with different people. So I spent most of the time in the retreat centers that were ran by Shipibo Kunibo, and that was
Okay.
likely about like nine-ish months at the time. Then I spent a lot of time in Colombia with the Taitas in the region called Putumayo, which is on the border with Ecuador.
I'm Colombian, by the way. Did you know that?
I did. Yeah, you mentioned that. I love Colombia. It's one of my favorite countries, and the medicine
It's
there is
beautiful.
so beautiful. And then I spent a lot of time in Brazil as well with the Hunikuin and Yawanawa tribes. I didn't spend so much time with them in Brazil, but I spent a lot of time with them in Mexico actually, and
Okay.
got to meet them in Ecuador. So I was like between different places, and I just saw how much time I can spend in the actual jungle with the actual people, as opposed to, you know, being inside of like the centers or somewhere
Of
else.
course. Of course. And what drove you there?
Again, same thing that I still don't understand. It's something inside of me. I just want to know what life is made out of and what else is there, right? It's the knowing of all of life that's been driving this whole entire thing. And as you said, like there was like moments where like I hitchhiked all the way from North Thailand to Malaysia. I drove with a motorbike throughout Vietnam, hitchhiked all the way through the north of Argentina, which was a interesting idea. But all of that was just kind of like driven by like, I want to know what life is made of. And I think that's one
Mm,
of the biggest gifts if we just get like so curious. Like I used to call that unconditioned curiosity, because when the world starts conditioning us, it's like, oh, you need to do this and you need to do this. But kids aren't like that. Kids are like, no, I want to know what is this and what is this. And like, if I put this in my
mm,
mouth and if I touch this and if I crawl under this place, like what is here? Living life in such a way just
fearless.
provides
Kids are
so much
fearless.
more joy. Yeah. Fearless and
Yeah, we should.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, we should be more like that. And Jesus talks about that. Like we should be more like kids. Kids also question a lot of things. And I feel like when we are conditioned, as you said, we stop questioning. We just start just accepting everything we're told about ourselves and about the world. So that's beautiful what you said. I would love to learn what's like the biggest or most unforgettable lesson that you learned from living with these indigenous tribes in the Amazon.
The biggest thing I would say is not about like the actual lesson, although there was a lot of lessons inside of certain spaces when I was being trained as a facilitator that I still use and still live by. I think the biggest thing was just observing how they live and who they are, and learning the distinction between them and us, let's say,
Mm,
how we've been conditioned to certain things in the West, like
yeah.
being so self-absorbed and self-obsessed, and it's my success and it's my happiness and the pursuit of happiness. One of the founder of Landmark, Werner Erhard, says that the single thing that keeps you from happiness is the pursuit of it.
So true.
And what I found in the Amazon is like when they live in the community, everything happens in the community. Trauma is a issue of the community, not of an individual. The healing happens in community, not individualistic. The happiness is shared by the community. And that distinction was, they call it, in some places, they call it a shared heart, where a person goes
Mm,
into the ceremony and they share the experience with everyone else. That's why a lot of
wow.
psychic things open up, and like you can see other people's experiences and you can feel other people. And in somatics, that happens when we really tune into our clients through like the felt sense experience, through the neuroception. And we've just gotten so far away from that. So I'd say the
Yeah.
biggest thing came from like their way of being, not a specific teaching.
Yeah. It's beautiful because like we are all connected. We're all part of a greater whole. Like we are interconnected. We just don't see it and we forget. Like that's one of the things that I've been really learning about lately is like the egoic illusion of separation. And that's what
Mhm.
causes, like the behaviors that we have and like, the wars and the need of control and power is because we believe we're separate from each other and from source. But it's beautiful that these indigenous tribes still remember that, and like we should definitely be more like them and not like the way that we are right now. And I want to talk about ayahuasca. I think this is a very interesting and also kind of controversial topic. I've never done it, but I definitely feel like I will at some point in my life. What role is did ayahuasca or plant medicine play in your own journey of awakening?
One of the biggest ones, for sure. And I say that as somebody who came out on the other side of plant medicine, and I don't really engage with it so much anymore. But what I've seen also is a lot of people who look at a part of their journey and they feel like they outgrow it. They then become judgmental of that part of the journey. And I've seen a lot of
Mm,
people who, for example, make a lot of money. They're going to say, like, money doesn't make you happy. And, like, like, you shouldn't do that. And it's like, yeah, but you've already done that to
yeah,
come to that realization. You've already made it. It's easy to say that to somebody who doesn't have it, right? And the same
yeah.
I've seen in like the plant medicine spaces. A lot of people come out of the plant medicine space and they're like, oh, there's so much darkness in that space, and it's
Mm,
like you shouldn't be focusing or like using plant medicine for your awakening, because all of it is available to you inside of yourself, which is true. And I'm going to say, just because it's not the thing I'm doing right now anymore, it's not that it was ever wrong. And it was the biggest part of my awakening, I'd say. And I say that as somebody who's done hundreds of ceremonies and
yeah.
through different medicine teachers. It's been the biggest awakening of like my consciousness and the
Mm.
awareness and the perception that is available to me.
Wow, that's amazing. And I agree with you. Like, these are tools that the universe, that Mother Earth gave us. And I also think that you have to use them during a phase of your life. And then just once they've fulfilled their purpose in your life, then you can move on. I feel that maybe some people do get stuck in that. And what you said about like when people get out of or like into the next chapter of like after plant medicine and then they start like demonizing plant medicine, it reminds me a lot of what I'm seeing in the spiritual religious world, where there's a lot of people that come from New Age, which is all of these things like energy meditation, plant medicine, and they jump into or they go into Christianity and they start demonizing all of these New Age because it's like there's so much darkness in there. But really, the darkness is not about the practices, or it's the darkness is darkness you're carrying inside. And if you didn't work through that darkness, then you're gonna find it somewhere else at some point in your life, right?
Yeah. And I like to look at one of the most complete, in my opinion, ways of looking at the world is through spiral dynamics,
You mentioned
which
that.
is a system developed by Ken Wilber. And if we look at that at the bottom, we kind of have like the animistic world, which is like this indigenous way of looking through the spirit and anima, where everything has like its own nature and its own spirit and soul, right? And then we move through like the separation phase. There's nothing wrong about it, and it's not like there's a hierarchy. It's like a spiral of evolution. And we move through the separation phase, which is like we become self-obsessed, we become self-absorbed, which I feel like that's where a lot of humanity is. And then after that, it becomes about like what's more, what's right or wrong.
Mm,
So we've got like
yeah.
the good and the bad and this and that. And then after that, it starts kind of like weaving into the space where more of things are allowed, more of the things are open. Like we actually understand the nuance of different perspectives, which is not I'm right and you're wrong. And like what I believe is the only thing. The nuance
Yeah.
allows for like I'm right and you're right. And if I'm able to hold that dual possibility, there's another thing that opens up in perception. And then beyond even that is the awareness of like, actually, we are the same. We are all
Mm,
the same, which is one of the highest levels of evolution as well, which is interesting because that's where Jnana Yoga is
mm.
going.
Yeah, it's like the highest levels of consciousness as well, right? You explained it beautifully, and I do agree that I can be right. You're right. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's also all about perception and your own experiences. But I also want to talk about business because this is a like entrepreneurship podcast. And you are a serial entrepreneur. You've done a lot of ventures. You've had a lot of failures, but successes as well. Yeah, tell us a little bit about how did all of these experiences that you lived evolved into creating retreats and programs?
Basically, I was asked to sit in the ceremonies, and it wasn't like serving the medicine. It was more so basically just making sure people don't die, And can you have them
Oh,
to the bathroom? Can you have them, like if they go out, can you make sure they don't run out in the forest and stuff like that? So I ended up taking on this like caretaker role inside of the medicine spaces. And then the way my mind has worked is I've always just been so curious about learning more, and there's no real boundary to the direction in which I want to go. I see this with a lot of people. They're like, I'm a coach, right? And everything they're doing is just about coaching. And then there's like, I'm a businessman and it's all about like business and making money. Or it's like,
Mm,
I'm an artist and they don't want to learn business or they don't want to learn anything because they're an artist. And
yeah.
so my curiosity has always been like, how wide can my learning be? So when I was there and I was teaching yoga and facilitating ceremonies, I started asking myself, like, what can I learn about business here, right? And I started like supporting some of the retreat centers with marketing. I started supporting some of the retreat centers with some like of the back end and the bookings. And I started seeing how like it all operates and how it all runs. So when I moved to Mexico, it was a wild experience, and it was during COVID, and just basically decided I'm gonna live here, met somebody, got married, built my house. And that was the moment where I realized like I can use all of the skills that I've learned and turn this into a retreat center as well. And then we started with my partner at the time, we started a retreat company called Vortex Retreats. And the idea was to bridge ancient wisdom with modern technology and make it in like a biohacking, Western psychology meets the indigenous plant medicines. There was so many good ideas. And again, like when I look at all of that, I could label that as failure because it never really took off. But in reality, I ran so many really powerful retreats and I've learned so much in the process that has now informed me in like what I'm doing right now.
Mm,
So yeah, it was just kind of like a natural progression to that. And then I moved basically from teaching yoga to having my own retreat company through leading retreats with indigenous people. In Brazil, for example, I led a retreat where I brought a group of people there and then bridged that with the integration practices. I nearly started a platform for integration specialists. I
oh, wow.
started a couple of smaller projects like that and collaborations with an Iboga center and a collaboration with like psychedelic integration treatment center and stuff like that. So all of these were just kind of like these experiments and curiosities and ideas. And then that eventually ended up evolving as well.
Into the programs that you have now.
Yeah, at some point started seeing what's happening in the world of plant medicine in terms of
Mm,
just what was happening with my participants really. And I would check in with them months and months after the program, and some of them would have like incredible experiences and their life would get so much better, but majority of them didn't. And it didn't really
mm,
matter when the integration wasn't prioritized, when the plant
right.
medicine was prioritized. So I ended
Mm,
up seeing that actually focusing on plant medicine is not really like a long-term solution for majority of the people that come dealing with something very specific. It's actually focusing on that and processing that, and then using a plant
mm,
medicine as an ally to just support a part of the process. But when it becomes like kind of like the idol, people tend to focus
yeah.
on that and they lose the actual goal, which is like, I can do this and I have an ally, right? It becomes like, oh, no, this ally is a god. So yeah, that was the progression as well. When I started seeing that, I was like, no, I want to move more into like the integration space without plant medicine. And that really was coaching. So it
Mm,
became like the process of like learning more of the tools in psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, internal family systems, and then eventually somatic work as well. And that led me to meeting my mentor, who's one of the pioneers in somatics. And I was blessed to have her pour her life's work into me. She's 83 years old and learned everything I know about somatics from her. And that was really like the catalyst for me working with some like really high impact people as well.
that's incredible how your journey, to me, it seems like it was like beautifully planned from like the age that you were 13 up to now, on all the things that you've experienced. So tell us a little bit about because you have the Dharma Academy and Metamorphosis. Am I correct? Tell us a little bit more about what you do inside of those programs.
So Dharma Academy is my personal brand. It's a company that I co-created with a partner of mine a few years ago, and then it ended up through the separation. I ended up just keeping the name, but I created a lot of programs around that as well, which never took off because they were co-created programs. But I
Mm,
kept the name as my personal brand. And then the Metamorphosis program is a project that I co-created with my business partner about 2 years ago, and we started it as the most in-depth ontological coaching and somatic programs online. We created it as a really comprehensive program with 6 calls a week. All calls go for
Wow.
multiple hours. The idea is when you have somebody really that has your back, it's like when you know
Right.
that you can call them, when you know that they're there, kind of like the way AA is created. You can always show up to an AA meeting anywhere in the world you are, right? So we wanted to
Yeah.
create a system where we have ruthless accountability, where people aren't going to be even 1 second late for the calls, where the camera is always on, they're really present with each other, and they know they can come to calls like almost every day. We developed that as a prototype, and then it really ended up taking off. And our collaboration between the two of us ended up being a really powerful combo for a lot of people. So we just kept it rolling, and over time it evolved into all women's program for multiple different reasons. But just the level of depth and safety that we were able to create was insane and unreal and out of this world. So that was a 12-week long program that eventually turned into practitioner training and a couple of free offerings as well that we're still offering, and really took off like beyond my wildest dreams. And then as Dharma Academy is my personal brand, within which I run an Inner Circle private podcast, which is a podcast where I just share tools, and it's the insights that I have from building a multi six-figure dollar business, from coaching hundreds of clients, from my own personal life and spirituality. And once a week, I just get on a computer and I just record solo episodes where I just put I just give tools and I just give insights and I just give value. So there's Inner Circle private podcast. There's also a book on the way. There's one-on-one coaching and a couple of masterminds that are coming out next year. And all of that lives inside of Dharma Academy / my main website, which is my name.
To me, it's incredible, like what you've been able to accomplish without being that present or active on social media, right? Because for most people, like most of my audience and my listeners and viewers, like we all use social media, most specifically Instagram, as our main like client generating or lead generating platform. For you, it was a little bit different, right?
Yeah, almost nothing actually came through social media. Most of the people that started working with me were word of mouth. So again, something that I've learned this is possibly one of the biggest gifts that y'all can receive, whoever is listening. One of the things I've learned when I was homeless is that my life, the quality of my life, is dependent on the quality of the people that are around me. Being homeless in southern France was actually a really big blessing, because a lot of people that are there own a lot of really big, beautiful villas, and there's a lot of celebrities and a lot of really big money down there.
Yeah.
So it was pretty bizarre not being able to afford a hotel or afford even the cheap hostel in there was up from 100 euros a night at the time. I don't know how it is now, but I remember not being able to afford anything. And yet the next day I would just go down to the beach and I would start conversation with someone, and that conversation led to a conversation with another person and to another person, and then suddenly I had a place to sleep in this multi-million-dollar villa, because they were just like, "Oh, where are you staying?" And I was like, "I don't know." And they were like, "Do you want to stay over here? We're going to do this thing and we're going to go out to the mountains." And I had these amazing experiences just literally by being able to speak to people, which again was a gift that I developed from the places where I wasn't able to speak with anyone, through having social anxiety and isolating myself, and then pushing myself into my deepest fears. Because the cave you fear
Right.
to enter holds the treasure you seek, right? So over time, what I built was like a muscle of connecting with people. And as I started working with some world-renowned coaches a couple of years ago, I just got into the habit of really connecting with everyone that I met. And some of them became my best friends. Some of them became my colleagues. For example, my business partner, I met him through a project that I led in Germany. And it was just like, how many people can I meet? How can I pour into them? How can I give value? And that eventually led through clients seeking me out, where it was like, hey, I know this person who needs somebody who does that depth of somatic work, because there's not a lot of people who are this skilled and qualified in certain specific things and bridge somatics with business, right? So
Right.
there was a lot of people that ended up coming to me in terms of my one-on-one clients. And still right now I have quite a few people who are wanting to work with me. And as soon as I have space, I just open it up. And Metamorphosis was built in the same way. We just reached out to our personal network and we were like, hey, this is what we're doing. Who wants in? And for about 6 or 7 months, we poured into them for free. Almost every day, we were on calls for hours and hours and hours, building it as a system, as a prototype. And then as soon as like we were done with that, the level of personal development and like the growth that they've experienced just rippled through word of mouth. And up until about 2 months ago, we haven't even had a website. So
Oh,
we haven't had a
no.
website. We haven't run any ads up until about a month and a half ago or something like that.
No website, no social media. Your life has been full of contrasts as well, right? Like sleeping on the streets in the south of France, and then the next day sleeping in a multi-millionaire mansion, being completely isolated as a teenager, to like having this huge network of influential people around you. Like that's really, really inspiring. And I'm sure that people listening are going to be like, wow, we need to know more about you. You call yourself a purpose mentor. So what does living your purpose feel like versus just chasing success? Because I feel that nowadays most people are just chasing success. And when they achieve success, it still feels empty because that success is not tied to their own purpose, to their true purpose, right?
Yeah, chasing success. I'd wanna, and you open up a very big topic here for me in the last part. I have to define success. And I think what most people chase is better. They just want to feel better, or they want to be
Mm,
better, or they want to look healthier, or they want to be richer or wealthier. And all of these words that have a ER at the end, they are loose and you can't actually get there. Because if you want to feel better, as soon as you get to point B, there's still better than B.
yeah.
And you get to the C and D and E, and they're still better than that. If you want to be healthier, as soon as you get healthier than you are right now, the healthier is still there, right? The wealthier is still there. So the thing with success is like you can't actually get to success because there's the next level of it. So it's not so much about chasing the fruits of it. It's about watering the roots and focusing on what's inside of it. And the fruit
Love
gets
that.
created as a byproduct. And when I talk about purpose, for me, purpose means the opening, the clearing within which I can be in the presence of what I already have. And purpose is a state of being and not as the fruits that I've created. And as I focus on my being and on the clearing that I
Mm.
create, and I watch the fruits happen, that's where like the real success that's like tangible and measurable and feels fulfilling happens. So if we take like going to the gym, for example, if I always like look at pictures of different models and six packs or specific body shapes or curves or muscles or whatever that is, or like weights, it's never going to feel enough. But if I focus on how can I love my body so much that I want to work out more, then I naturally just work out as a byproduct of loving myself. And I'd say that that is like the biggest thing that you can achieve in terms of like health.
That you mentioned that you don't like when it comes to purpose, you also don't chase purpose. You become it, right?
Yeah.
You are in a state of being of purpose. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And again, it's the same as like the pursuit of happiness, right?
Mm,
The thing that is gonna hold you from, you will never be happy if you're in the pursuit of happiness, because the pursuit of happiness is the fact of not being happy. Chasing the
exactly.
purpose is not being in purpose. Chasing money is not being wealthy. Chasing health is not being healthy. Chasing of anything outside of yourself is just taking you there, as opposed to being inside of the clearing that the purpose and happiness
Mm,
and joy and all of that is.
and everything, like you don't need to chase anything because everything is inside of you. Like you can literally find everything inside of you. You can activate wealth if you look within. You can activate health, your purpose, everything. It was just so used to focusing on the external and trying to find things outside of us. Again, talking about like what the way that we've been conditioned by society. It's like they want us to forget that we have all the answers and we have the power inside of us.
Yeah.
How do you help your clients find that same sense of alignment that you are talking about?
There would be two main things. One would be just the coming deeply into the present moment, into the presence, in the awareness, into the truth, the resonance of truth. And then two would be seeing what the resonance of truth or God or that
Mm,
love, deep unconditional love, is not. And that often goes into the traumatic imprints, right? So we have to see when we're running from our truth or when we're running from traumatic imprints. When it's from the truth, it's embodied. It's like this deep sense of peace. And when we're like their traumatic imprints are running us, that's when, we get really reactive and we make stories and, we chase instead of just be. So when we see that, that goes into the process of excavation, which is the way I work with my clients. I take them into the deepest traumatic memories, into the deepest parts, and then we work on processing and completing all of that, including all resentment, all guilt, all shame, all pain from the past. So that is the excavation process. And then at the same time, working on building a sustainable practice of just being in the
Right.
resonance of truth.
Right. Because there's no point if they do the work with you, but then after that, they just don't continue it by themselves, right?
Yeah, the purpose of personal development is that it ends. And that's a flip from the Western psychology, which is, the purpose of psychology and psychotherapy is that you stay in it. Because there's always more to uncover and more to dig out. And if you've done all the stuff around your parents, then go into your grandparents and their parents, right?
Yeah.
But I believe that our life is to be lived and not to just be in the process of healing constantly. So we focus on how to live our best life and have a purposeful life and grow and expand. And as a byproduct of having a bigger vision, healing happens again as a byproduct, not as the purpose. You don't buy a car to just go from a gas station to the gas station to the oil change to the mechanic, right? You want to feel the wind in your hair as you're driving on the road.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's so true. It's so true. And everyone spends, especially in the personal development space, I feel like everyone is always jumping from practice to practice because they still haven't been able to properly heal. What do you think this is? 'Cause I see it very, very often that someone tries somatic practice, then theta healing, then meditation, then journaling, then therapy, and it seems like they can never heal whatever they're trying to heal. Have you noticed that as well?
I have a few different ways of looking at that, and I think it's a bit nuanced on what is running the show. Because majority of the time what I'm seeing is, and I've seen that in myself, is when I was coming from a place where I felt like I was broken and I was looking for something to heal me, nothing could heal me. Because when I'm inherently broken, nothing can really heal me in that inherent brokenness, right? Again, it just comes back to the same as it's the pursuit of something instead of being inside of the awareness of our true nature. And the other part is the connection to divinity or the higher power of God, which is if I put all these idols there and I don't focus on my real connection with God, then all of these become gods in their own way. And we end up seeing none of them can actually be that. None of them has actual power of the absolute. I see that with people who go deep into mentorship with other people as well. They end up pedestalizing their mentors. And they're like, oh, that person is a god, and they're that, and they're this, and they're that, and they're this for my life, and they're gonna support you, and they're gonna heal you. And then they end up seeing the humanity of their mentor. And then they end up turning around and they make them wrong and they blame them and they shame them and they demonize them, right? Because they see I got tricked and they're actually really human and they have all this darkness inside of them. And it's yes, but the challenge is, the issue is that you pedestalize the person. They're always going to be human. Just like every tool is always just going to be a tool. And if God's not at the center and our recognition of our divinity, then we just keep getting caught up in the chase of something that's never going to fill us up all the way, right?
Yeah.
Inside of that, I'd say there's nothing wrong with that either. Sometimes you can get lost in all these different ways and you're just looking for yourself, and that's okay. And I think all the ways should eventually lead to the connection to God and connection to oneself. And if they're leading anywhere else, then they're a slippery slope.
Reminds me a bit of what the Bible talks about. Don't idolize anything other than God. Religion has used it to control people, but what you just said makes so much sense. If you idolize anything outside of you, then you're never going to be able to find what you're looking for, right? Because there's always going to be something. There's always going to be darkness. There's always going to be something else. Now that we're talking in the topic of God, I always ask my guests if they believe in God. Of course you do, because you've mentioned God, but I would love to know, what does God mean to you personally? What is God?
For me, God is, just by traditional terms, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, It's everything. He's everything. And there's different ways of connecting. And one for me that has been really powerful has been looking at Jesus and what Jesus represents to me, which is the embodiment of unconditional love. Then the other places where I found God, as I mentioned before, is really in my most challenging moments. And what I've learned is if I look at the possibility of the duality of that God is both the unconditional love as well as the most painful moments, because those ones also carry the unconditional love that goes far beyond just comfort, right? That's been the awareness that I've carried in the understanding of like, wow, everything is God. And it's just me reorienting back towards that awareness that allows me to be with whatever experience I'm having.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And like what you mentioned about the duality, like it is said that God kind of like, in order to be able to experience himself, had to like, create this duality, right? Of like good and evil, light and dark. Otherwise, it or he or she, whatever, like I still struggle sometimes to talk to refer to God as a male, because it's not, but it's what we've been used to do. He needed to experience himself, and so he did that. So as you, like you were saying before, like you've met him in your best, in the most loving situations, but also in your darkest times, because there's that duality, which is the way that God experiences himself or itself. Do you have like a special practice or ritual, or how do you connect with this higher power on a daily basis or a weekly basis, or how do you do it?
I pray every day, every morning and every night. And every time I wake up, for me, the prayer happens one, yes, through wording, but two, it's more about the feeling as I'm saying something. And it's not about praying for necessarily, although sometimes I do pray for specific things. And the way I pray is I look through my life and I'm like, who do I get to become in order to have something in my life? And then I ask God to bring in circumstances and opportunities for me to grow into that person. So I don't ask for money. I ask for the opportunities to help me be a good steward of money. I don't ask for
Right.
love. I ask for the things that are going to shape me and carve me and mold me into being somebody who has that, who experiences that, and who understands that God is the only real provisioning, and like the only love that I have to seek is the love with myself and love with God. So this is like the things that I ask for if I ask for anything. But most of the time, I just, as soon as I wake up, my first thing is I put my hands on my heart and I'm like, thank you, God, for everything I have right now, for the roof over my head, for the bed to sleep in, and I just describe everything that is there, and I put myself in that space of gratitude. And before I go to sleep, I just deeply honor everything that has been gifted to me. So that as one practice. And then as the other practice, I believe that God is found in the present moment, and everything that is not in the present moment is again just the chasing. And it's all in our minds. Like the
Yeah.
anxiety only exists in your mind. The pain from the past and the guilt and shame, they only really exist in your mind. So I get myself out of my mind and I get myself into the body as my meditation practice as well. And I see how present I can be with everything that is existing here. What needs to be cleared, what needs to be moved, but also what needs to be oriented towards.
That's beautiful. I love that you put your hands on your heart, as I do the same. Like I don't pray like this or like this. And something that I've started doing pretty recently actually is to, when before like sleeping, like after, I usually read a little bit before going to sleep. So after reading and like a little bit before sleeping, I just go throughout my day and I just like review my day, and I just give thanks to everything that happened, like every little detail that I can remember from that day. And it's been really, really helpful to like help me also fall asleep in this sense of gratitude and peace. And then when I wake up again, like thanks for this, like you say, like for this new day, for the roof, for like the day that's about to come. It's gonna be the best day of my life. Thank you, God. So, but I also do it with my hands on my heart. So it's interesting that you do it as well. All right. So I have this series section on the podcast that it's called the rapid fire round. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of quick questions, and then you give me an answer, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So one spiritual tool that you can't live without.
Presence, being with the breath, being in the body, sitting with the body, sensations, somatics.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. A book that changed your life.
Untethered Soul and Alchemist.
I believe you had to let go of to step into your purpose.
That I'm inherently broken and that I need something outside of myself to be fixed.
What does it mean to you to be an awakened entrepreneur?
That there's no separation between spirituality and business. I see my businesses and my work as a mirror to liberate myself deeper.
And one message you'd share with your younger self.
Don't stop getting curious. Just stay curious about everything all the time and see how far you can go. And you can't get anything wrong as long as you keep failing and trying.
Nice. Curiosity is key. Yeah, I love that. I would also tell that to my younger self. All right, Jacob, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. Before we go, tell us where can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to.
Yeah, my Instagram, it's my first and last name. I have a couple of links in the bio over there. One is to Metamorphosis. Again, that's all women's container. We have a bunch of free offerings throughout the year as well. So that's one thing that you can join. My website is jakobgricar.com. Again, my first and last name.com. And on there, I have a link to my private podcast as well, which is the easiest, cheapest way to just get like a lot of me, like unreal amounts of value for the price of a coffee. So yeah, that's the one that I always direct people to, because my one-on-ones, I open them once or twice a year and they're always like booked out immediately. So yeah, within the group container would be Metamorphosis, and the way to be in touch with me and like just be inside, like close to the fire, would be the Inner Circle podcast.
I'll make sure to share all the links in the show notes and on YouTube in the description of the video. Again, thank you so much for your time. This was super, super interesting conversation. Thank you guys for staying until the end. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to rate it. If you feel if it's a worth of 5 stars, then please give us 5 stars. Share it with a friend. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. What was your favorite part about this episode? And I will see you next week with more. Bye.